got the nail memo.
All right, so Israel crosses the Jordan. We went a little bit over Rahab last week. We are not going to get probably to when they go back in to conquer Jericho until next week because I didn't get through enough. So we're going to go over Israel crosses the Jordan this time. So God provided safe passage across the Jordan River for Joshua and the Israelites. The memory verse is Deuteronomy 7:9. Therefore know that the Lord your God, He is God, the faithful God who keeps covenants and mercy for 1,000 generations with those who love Him and keep His commandments. Has it been 1,000 generations from Adam and Eve? Nope. It was only 60 to Jesus. It seems like it should be more because there's a lot of history in there. But remember those long lifespans. All that has to play into that. So before we get into this crossing of the Jordan River, we're more familiar with the crossing of the Red Sea. Lots of times people don't even think there's another crossing because if I say, when did God part the waters? Everybody usually says, well, it's the Red Sea. Well, He did it twice. He did it going into the wilderness and He did it coming out of the wilderness. All right, so let me just refresh your memory because I don't want you to forget this. Remember the first Red Sea crossing. Remember? This is a map of where they crossed from. They were hemmed in, come on down, and they come right here to Nuweiba Beach. Remember that? And that's called today Nuweiba al-Muzahina, the waterway of Moses' opening. Still called that today. I got that off of a recent map. All right, let me take you back here. Because right here on this side, where that little bitty dot is, you won't see one on this side because the Saudi Arabia government moved it, was the Solomon's columns. Remember that? Solomon had them erected, and it was to show this is the crossing site. All right, let me keep going. In between the columns, there have been chariot wheels, coralized chariot wheels. There have been 8-spoke chariot wheels, chariot boxes, human skeletal remains, 6-spoke chariot wheels, 4-spoke chariot wheels. In 1998, a chariot hub 4-spoke was found. In 2000, 6-spoke chariot wheels. I mean, that's exactly what we would expect to find. Horse hooves, things like that. Where this happened at, remember what happened to the Egyptian army? Yep, all of them died, right? And they fished out the Pharaoh at that time, and I don't have this on this slideshow, but remember he was found and they did a CT scan on him and he had boils that were on him. That was the plague of boils. So that proved that. So I just wanted to remind you of the first crossing and its miracles, that we still have proof of that. And now we're going to go into the second parting of the water. So then Joshua rose early in the morning, and they set out from the acacia grove and came to the Jordan, he and all the children of Israel, and lodged there before they crossed over. So it was after 3 days that the officers went through the camp, and they commanded the people, saying, when you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God, and the priests and the Levites bearing it, then you shall set out from your place and go after it. This is an obedience thing. If you haven't been paying attention so far, anytime God tells them to do something, it's with great detail. It's not just, just show up when you want to or anything like that. It's always detailed.
That's what I want.
Exactly. It'd help if it was an audible voice, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm. Writing on the wall somewhere.
Right?
Or text message or phone
Yeah. Yet there shall be a space between you and it about 2,000 cubits by measure. Y'all remember what a cubit is? Hebrew cubit? Oh, y'all remembered! Good. Here. You're going to get your sticker. All right. We went over that when we went over Goliath. Okay, so they have to be 2,000 cubits by measure. Do not come near it, that you may know the way by which you must go, for you have not passed this way before. And Joshua said to the people, sanctify yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you. Wasn't there wonders that came before the first parting of the Red Sea? Okay. Then Joshua spoke to the priests, saying, take up the Ark of the Covenant and cross before the people. So they took up the Ark of the Covenant and went before the people. And the Lord said to Joshua, this day I will begin to exalt you in the sight of all Israel, that they may know that as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. They had to learn to trust Moses, didn't they? Because they bellyached and like, hey, you're from Egypt. Why do we have to listen to you? They learned to listen to him. Because if it wasn't for him, they'd probably be dead a whole lot sooner than what they were, because they kept kindling God's anger against them. It says, you shall command the priests who bear the Ark of the Covenant, saying, when you have come to the edge of the water of the Jordan, you shall stand in the Jordan. Now you would think if you're carrying this heavy Ark of the Covenant, and it's got rings on it, so there's a pole that goes through the rings, so somebody's going to be carrying the poles. Even they can't touch the Ark of the Covenant. When you're carrying something that heavy, you think you want to just keep walking. You don't want to get in the middle of the water and stop. This is what he says to do. Okay? So Joshua said to the children of Israel, come here and hear the words of the Lord your God. And Joshua said, by this you shall know that the living God is among you, and that he will without fail drive out from before you the Canaanites and the Hittites and the Hivites and the Perizzites and the Girgashites and the Amorites and the Jebusites. The Ite clan. And they're all Canaanites. They all derive from Canaan, the cursed line. So let me just pause right here for just a second and point this out. When the people came out of Egypt, Egypt worshipped over 2,000 false gods. Every single plague, if you remember, was against, if not one, several of their false gods. It was God showing up and say, hey, I am the God of the water. I am the God of the sea, the God of, earth, and he has control of everything, the divine supremacy here. He showed them what was a plague to the Egyptians. It was a miracle to God's people, because there was always a dividing line from the people in the north, from Goshen, and to the Egyptians, remember? And they have to do something of obedience in that last plague. Remember, they had to put the blood on the door, stay inside. If they went out, if they chose not to put that blood on the door, they would die, okay? So it was miracle after miracle after miracle. When we go back to when they crossed the Red Sea, still it was miracle after miracle after miracle, because he was leading them in a cloud by fire. He was doing all of these things. He turned bitter water sweet. It was over and over. There was miracles. Even in the wilderness, there was the quail and manna from heaven. There was water coming from the rock. We went over all these things, and this was to show the people that came out of this polytheistic society, this is the one true God, and he proved it. Now that generation is gone. They were supposed to teach their children, that was the command by Moses, teach your children when you walk along the way, when you sit in your house, everything was a teaching moment. Now this generation, they can't enter the promised land. So it's this next generation who's going to enter the promised land. God's going to have to show them who he is too. Does that make sense what I'm saying? He's got this generation, but they're gone. Now he's focused on this generation. Moses is gone. They need a new leader. So now he's got Joshua that's coming in. It says, behold, the ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth is crossing over before you into the Jordan. Now therefore take yourselves 12 men from 12 tribes, 1 man from every tribe. Remember, the Ark of the Covenant was God's dwelling place among his people. So if the Ark of the Covenant is going before the people, it's just like God going before the people. And it shall come to pass, as soon as the soles of the feet of the priests who bear the ark of the Lord of all the earth, shall rest in the waters of the Jordan. That means they got to stop. That the waters of the Jordan shall be cut off. The waters that come down from upstream, they shall stand as a heap. Now, if you remember when we were going over the parting of the Red Sea, I took y'all back to the Hebrew word where it talks about the waters coming up. And that Hebrew word, it could mean congealed. It could mean frozen. That's the definition of the word, somehow water was able to stand up high, and they passed between like columns of water. And we talked about it then that that's something supernatural. Water doesn't behave that way. Nature doesn't behave that way. This is something supernatural. So again, there's going to be something supernatural that's going to happen here, because it says it's going to stand up in a heap. All right? So it was when the people set out from their camp to cross over the Jordan with the priests bearing the Ark of the Covenant before the people. And as those who bore the ark came to the Jordan, and the feet of the priests who bore the ark dipped in the edge of the water, for the Jordan overflows all its banks during the whole time of the harvest. So this tells us a specific time of the year, that the waters which came down from upstream stood still and rose in a heap very far away at Adam, the city that is beside Zaretan. So the waters that went down into the sea of Arabah, the salt sea, failed and were cut off, and the people crossed over opposite Jericho. I know this is hard to follow because we don't know where all those towns are, but if you study the old maps, you can get a sense. And that's why it's important that they give us these names, because we can kind of pinpoint where they were, where they camped out, all of these things. This is why archaeologists should use the Bible, so they can go and they can map it out. You know how when we were going over Mount Sinai, and I told y'all, it's wrong in the back of your Bibles, because Mount Sinai ain't on the Sinai Peninsula. Galatians tells us it's in Saudi Arabia. But yet in every Bible, it's in the back on the Sinai Peninsula. Now, over in Saudi Arabia, remember, we had Mara, the bitter water place. We had the Solomon's columns that let us remember the map points that we went to, and we went to the rock that Moses split. All that's around that same area where that top of that mountain is blackened. Remember where the fire was. So we have to use the Bible as guidelines. It comes before really the historical record, because it's a historical record in itself. It comes before traditions, for tales passed on and such like that. It says, then the priest who bore the ark of the covenant of the Lord stood firm on what? Does that sound familiar? Okay, so if we go and we were to dam up the river, let's just say down there at Camp Croft, just dam it up on both sides, and we tried to cross, is it going to be dry ground? No, it's going to be silty, right? It's going to be wet. Okay, it says, in the midst of the Jordan, and all Israel crossed over on dry ground until all the people had crossed completely over the Jordan. Another miracle. So let me show y'all this. This is the Jordan River at Gilgal, looking east to the plains of Moab. According to Joshua 4:9, there are 2 sets of 12 stones erected as a memorial. One set was placed at Gilgal, and the other was set up in the middle of the Jordan where the priest carrying the Ark of the Covenant stood. So if, they're looking for rocks on the banks, you're not going to find it. It's supposed to be in the middle of the Jordan River. Now, when we have those lessons like in our children's books, or we have, like the little cartoonish things, we always see it to the side. Those 12 stones are stacked to the side. They're kind of over here on the bank of the river, but that's not what Scripture says. It was in the middle.
Established, we teach children wrong.
Yeah.
Christmas. It's all wrong.
Yep. Okay. These are the stones that are still there at Gilgal. It is believed that these are the remnants of the 12 stones that were set up. Just wanted y'all to see that was still there today.
So were those in the river though?
No, this is at Gilgal.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so this is the Jordan River. The rocks would have been in the middle in the water, so you can't see them. These are Gilgal. So there was 2 different locations. It says, and it came to pass when all the people that had completely crossed the Jordan, that the Lord spoke to Joshua, saying, take for yourselves 12 men from the people, 1 man from every tribe, and command them, saying, take for yourselves 12 stones from here, out of the midst of the Jordan, from the place where the priest's foot stood firmly. You shall carry them over with you and leave them in the lodging place where you lodge tonight. That's going to be at Gilgal. Then Joshua called the 12 men whom he had appointed from the children of Israel, 1 man from every tribe. And Joshua said to them, cross over before the ark of the Lord your God into the midst of the Jordan. Each one of you take up a stone on his shoulder according to the number of the tribes of the children of Israel. And this may be a sign among you when your children ask in time to come, saying, what do these stones mean to you? Then you shall answer them that the waters of the Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. Like, this is a miracle for your generation. Teach this to your kids. When it crossed over the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off, and these stones shall be a memorial to the children of Israel for how long? Forever. Now, back in ancient Israel, piles of stones come to mean something. Columns come to mean something. If you remember Absalom, you remember David's son Absalom, who comes in and tries to take the kingdom? And it says he is riding through, and he's got this long, beautiful hair, and he gets caught, and Joab has to shank him, and kill him and stuff. And they erect stones when he died for his burial place. And it was a reminder. It was to remind all of Israel, like, what happened. Like, he betrayed his father. He betrayed Israel and what he had done. That was a reminder. So this practice keeps on happening after this moment. It says, and the children of Israel did so, just as Joshua commanded, and took up 12 stones from the midst of the Jordan. And the Lord had spoken to Joshua according to the number of the tribes of the children of Israel, and carried them over to a place where they lodged, and laid them down there. I'm just going to tell y'all, I would hope nobody would volunteer for me to carry a rock to our next dwelling place, because, you know, it's not going to be a little pebble. It's probably going to be a huge rock. Then Joshua set up 12 stones in the midst of the Jordan, and in the place where the feet of the priests who bore the Ark of the Covenant stood, and they are there to this day. All right? So the priests who bore the ark stood in the midst of the Jordan until everything was finished that the Lord had commanded Joshua to speak to the people, according to all that Moses had commanded Joshua. And the people hurried and crossed over. Yes, I would hurry too. Then it came to pass when all the people had completely crossed over that the ark of the Lord and the priests crossed over in the presence of the people. And the men of Reuben and the men of Gad and the tribe of Manasseh crossed over armed before the children of Israel, as Moses had spoken to them. Why are they armed? Yep. They're going to war. They're supposed to go into these Canaanite lands. Remember all them ites I just read? And they're supposed to kill every man, woman, and child. I know that sounds harsh, but again, their pagan practices, they had to be wiped out. God wanted that pure nation.
Well, we need to remember too that this wasn't just 1,000 people either. It's still
Oh yes,
a lot of people.
they were over 2 million when they left Egypt.
Right.
So it's a lot.
So how many would there be now? I know some died off, but still.
Yeah. About 40,000 prepared for war crossed over before the Lord for battle to the plains of Jericho. On that day, the Lord exalted Joshua in the sight of all Israel. You have to have that if you're going to be that leader of this number of people. Remember how stubborn they are? They're not going to follow just anybody. It's got to be a God thing. And it says, and they feared him as they had feared Moses. Well, they didn't fear Moses at first, did they? They had to learn all the days of his life. Then the Lord spoke to Joshua, saying, command the priests who bear the ark of the testimony to come up from the Jordan. You see, you think it's interesting that they call it something different here? It's not called the Ark of the Covenant here. It's called the Ark of the Testimony. I just thought that was interesting. Why'd they change the name of it right there? And then I got to thinking, and this is just my thoughts, is it because of what it's going to hold? Does anybody remember what was in there? Ten Commandments.
Aaron's rod.
What were those? Those were a
It's a
testimony.
Yeah.
And I wonder if it's significant here and they use the word testimony because this is the next generation. You know, like the old generation would have known what was in there and they would have, called it the Ark of the Covenant. They were the generation who fashioned it. This generation, is it called the testimony for them to remember what had happened with those artifacts that were in there. Joshua therefore commanded the priests, saying, "Come up from the Jordan." And it came to pass, when the priests who bore the ark of the covenant of the Lord had come from the midst of the Jordan, and the soles of the priests' feet touched dry land, that the waters of the Jordan returned to their place and overflowed all its banks, as before. Now the people came up from the Jordan on the 10th day of the first month. That's specific, right? We have that. And they camped in Gilgal on the east border of Jericho. That's their first camping spot. That's why we know that's where the stones were placed. And those 12 stones which they took out of Jordan, Joshua set up at Gilgal. Then he spoke to the children of Israel, saying, "When your children ask their fathers in time to come, what are these stones?" This is the second time he said that, right? That's important. If something's stated in Scripture twice, it's important. Did I miss something? What are these stones? Then you shall let your children know, saying, Israel crossed over the Jordan on dry land. For the Lord your God dried up the waters of the Jordan before you until you had crossed over, as the Lord your God did the Red Sea. See, he linked them there. He did this for this generation. He's doing this for this generation, which he dried up before us until we had crossed over, that all the peoples of the earth may know that the hand of the Lord, that it is mighty, that you may fear the Lord your God. How long? That's a reverence. That's not a shaking, trembling fear. That's a reverence. A God who has supernatural abilities. Because he's not bound by nature. You know, we've talked before, if this is a timeline, and God created here, this is eternity past, and then we're on this timeline, and then this is where time's going to end around Revelation 20:21. This is no time over here. This is going to be eternity future. If God's a creator of time, he can see into it, right? Because he's not bound by it. He's not bound by nature. So he can see into it, and he can see Jana. He can see Debbie. He can see and know each and every one of us. And I know that was always really hard for me to comprehend, especially when I was younger. But, I guess you grow and, you understand things the more you study and you read. Because I never did understand, well, how can God know everything? Because I was tying him to time. Because, it's hard for me to understand because I'm tied to time. I want to, link everything to how I perceive things. But it ain't about how I perceive things. It's how he perceives things. And we have to look at the world with a biblical perspective. And I think that's where things change and we can gain a little more understanding. Not that we're going to understand it all. But what he's saying here about teaching your children, everything being a teaching moment, back in biblical times, it was the man's job to teach the sons. Okay, that's like, Tim, if you had sons, they would have went to work with you. I mean, just say you were on a fishing boat. If you were Zebedee and you had your sons, that was a teaching moment. They would come with you. They would learn your trade. You would teach them about their faith all throughout what you did. That was you. You didn't leave your sons at home with your wife to raise. That was a father's job, to teach the sons. And mothers, the daughters. And, of course, the men are the head of the household. It's a patriarchal society. And when it's talking about teach, we should still do that today. Because, You know, I can stand up here and tell you times in my life where God, I know God showed up. I know God did something. And I can teach that to my kids. But how much more is it going to mean when they can recognize God working in their own life? It's one thing for me to say he's working in mine, but they need to be able to recognize God at work. They need to be able to recognize the enemy. You know, lots of times Christians don't want to think that we're in a war. We're already in a war. From the time we're born, we're in a spiritual war. And it's going to be a tug of war until we make that decision. And you know, when we make that decision, we're sealed in God's book. And when we're sealed in God's book, it says that nothing can pluck us out of his hand. But does that mean life's easy? No. And I think, you know, like a lot of this new age Christianity, that's what's being taught. And if you look at scripture, if that was the way things were, if Christianity was easy, God hated Paul. I mean, look at all what he went through.
Well, Jesus told the disciples, you will have trouble.
Mm-hmm. Right?
It's
And-
not you might.
Not you.
Right?
Yeah.
And the hardest thing to do is die to yourself. It's not about you. It's about him. So that's where I'm going to end today. Y'all got any questions, comments?
I think it, you know, when you were talking about earlier about how, you know, God told them to wipe everybody out, man, woman, and child. I think that we struggle with that today. When you think about Palestine and everything that's going over there, you know, you go in and you fight and you get them to leave you alone for a bit, but you don't eliminate that group of people. They're going to continue to come back.
Yep.
And it's gonna continue to get worse, and people are going to continue to die because you don't do that.